Bum 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 ba dee da dum. Yo da da. Ay da dee da da. Ay da dee da dee da da. Ay da dee da dee da da. Ay da dee da dee da da. Ay da da. Good evening and a good vach to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Shavua Tov, a good week. We're starting off a new one here in LA. I gotta tell you, it poured so hard. It was so cold and so rainy. And we had a couple of events during Shabbos at a few different locations, and we had a walk and we suited up and, you know, the hood and the layers. And I mean, there was just no keeping the water out. We were just cold and wet. But we kept ourselves warm by being a community and gathering to pray and sing together, and I'm still buzzed about that. How are you? I hope you had a great Shabbos. We're going to start the new week off right with, I think this has got to be the shortest daf in the Talmud. The A side of page 33, super short, and the B side doesn't exist, and we'll explain why in a moment. Let's light up the darkness. All right, who's with us on a Saturday night? Bill in mid-Missouri. Paula says, keep singing. Actually, you said keep signing. Maybe you mean I should stop singing and go to sign language. Bella in Florida. Marilu in Alabama. Paul in the Great Northwest. Mark in Tucson. Melissa in Great Neck. Yabetz in Chicago saying Shavua Tov. Paula says, I hear a Nina note sweetly given. Paula says, Shalom. Pam in Oregon. Thomas says, Baruch Hashem with a Spanish spelling. Paul has got more snow coming here tonight. It snowed in our area, not in LA proper, but in Pasadena. A bunch of snow came down. I think there was snow on the Hollywood sign. Very unseasonable over here. Where is Tomas? Is Shavua Tov from Houston, Texas. Joy is from the valley where the Eruv was down. Yikes! So that could really be a challenge for young families with strollers. Bill, yeah, I have another LA friend who sent me a picture of some of the LA River today, and it shocked me. Joseph checking in from Lowell, Massachusetts. And over there on the YouTube side, Lynn checking in from North Texas, and she likes that nigun. It's a beautiful waltz, isn't it? We use that tune very often for the Mizmor LeDavid. We sing it 3 times with 3 different tunes during Shalosh Sudas, the third meal on Shabbos afternoon. Okay, so yes, we're going to do Mishna number 4 here in chapter 5. Our daf is page 33 here in Tractate Nazir, the 17th volume of the Talmud. I just left us, knocked off a little early yesterday on page 32, so we could do this Mishnah and its Gemara complete today. So 33a, very short, what's actually on it. The Mishnah number 4 that we're going to read in a moment is all on page 32. The Gemara starts at the bottom of 32. Then on 33a, there's like 2 paragraphs. And on 33b, no text whatsoever. And then on 34a, we'll just read a few paragraphs today so that we can complete the Gemara of Mishnah number 4. So why does page 33b have no text on it whatsoever? What does it mean to have a page of Talmud with no Talmud on it? Well, of course, the way that the Talmud is printed, the Talmud existed, right? The oral law goes back to Mount Sinai. The Mishnah was first compiled around the year 200 of the Common Era by Yehuda Hanasi. And then the Gemara was compiled around the year 500 by Ravina and Rav Ashi. And then immediately they started adding commentary. I mean, there was commentary already on the Mishnah before the Gemara. That's the Tosefta, right? Not the Tosafists, but the Tosefta. And then over the centuries, various people added commentary to it. And there wasn't really a magnificent entire commentary on the whole Talmud until Rashi, right? So I believe Rashi's 11th century. He completed his commentary. And then the next generation began the new commentary, and that's the Tosafists, right? The Tosafot, right, or in Ashkenaz, Tosafos. And that word refers to a group of people. Often they're called Rashi's grandsons. It included Rashi's grandsons and his sons-in-law, but there are other people included in this group as well. And they're known, and in English we would call them the Tosafists, and so they did this magnificent commentary that is in the standard edition of a Talmud, which was first sort of standardized and paginated. The Talmud obviously existed long before the 1500s when this was done, when printing really came into vogue. But it was always handwritten, right? It was handwritten. And so now you might be hearing about that the most expensive historical written artifact will soon be coming to auction at Sotheby's, known as the Sassoon Codex, right? And that is a handwritten Hebrew Bible that is complete, right? It's the earliest, most complete Hebrew Bible, and that's, I believe, from about the year 900. It's going to sell for something like $50 million. It warms the heart to see that in the year 900, the edition that was considered the standard edition is exactly the same as the edition that we have today. But that was handwritten. In the 1500s, printing arrived, and there was the Bamberg Talmud, I think was the first sort of standardized Talmud, or maybe the Samsino, and then eventually there was the Vilna edition published in Lithuania. And that's when it acquired, the standardized pagination that we have today. So the Talmud is 2,711 pages with an A side and a B side for almost every page. I mean, some tractates end on the A side of a page, and that's why there's no B side. But here, page 33b, in the middle of our tractate Nazir, has no text of the Talmud, no text of the Gemara on the B side, because that page is entirely taken up with the commentary of the Tosafists, right? The Tosafists. And it's that, like I say, that commentary that came after Rashi, and it is both a commentary on the Talmud and a commentary on Rashi. Now, why did I title our show today, Thank God for the Brave Tosafists? Recently, not so long ago, for Christians, I'm sure it was a very tragic event, heart-wrenching to see Notre Dame, that cathedral in Paris, was caught fire, and it was a terrible, terrible destruction to that very old edifice that is so holy in the Christian tradition. Now, on that same site, in the era of the Tosafists, right? So we're talking about the generation after Rashi, right? I think it's 11th century, late 11th century, 12th century. What happened? So the church at that time banned the Talmud, and they collected like every existing edition of the Talmud, right? This is before printing. So these were all handwritten scrolls and codexes of the Talmud. They were gathered from around, I guess, France. I don't know if the reach of the French church went further than that. I'm sure Bill probably knows a lot about this event. But at any rate, they gathered every copy of the Talmud that they could get their hands on, and they made it illegal to learn and teach the Talmud. And they brought all these books to Paris, and at the site of that cathedral, they burned them all. Massive, massive book burning. And at that point, it was illegal on pain of death to learn and teach the Talmud. Now, the Jewish tradition wasn't going to end because of that generation of Jew haters and book burners. So what happened? So the Tosafists, who were already obviously extremely expert in the Talmud, they said, what are we going to do? They can't end with us. So they assigned that in this group of people, everyone who was particularly expert already in one of the tractates would make himself completely what's the word I'm looking for? That they would memorize it in its entirety, right? They would become 100% fluent in the language of a particular tractate, right? So each one in the group was responsible for one of the tractates and for knowing it by heart. And then what would happen is they would learn together, and when one of them was reciting the tractate that he knew by heart, the other people would listen, and if they, saw a connection from their own tractate that connected with what was being read by the guy who memorized it, he would speak up. And in this way, the Tosafists became so supple with making connections from one tractate to another. I mean, already the sages of the Gemara and the sages of the Mishna were very good at linking different teachings from different collections of Mishnas or Gemaras to each other, but the Tosafists just took that to a whole other level. And so when the Talmud was eventually, the pagination was standardized, when printing came about, and print, we needed to have all the printed editions have the same pagination. So the Tosafists, right, is printed on the margin opposite the Rashi. Right, so there's always a whole Rashi commentary on the other side of the page, the Tosafists commentary. But page 33b and that standard pagination ended up being all Tosafists. So there's a little bit of a lesson in history on the banning and the printing of the Talmud. Okay, we pick this up at the bottom of 32b with Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 5. And we've actually already encountered this Mishnah, so it'll sound familiar. If there were people walking along the way and one other person was approaching them and he's coming at a distance, they can't see who it is. And so one of the group who's walking says, I am hereby a Nazir if the person approaching us is so-and-so. And another one of them says, well, I am hereby a Nazir if that person is not so-and-so, right? So the first one said, if that's John Smith, I'm going to be a Nazir. And the second one says, well, if that's not John Smith, I am a Nazir. And then a third member of the group says, I am hereby a Nazir if one of you two is a Nazir. And the fourth one said, I am hereby a Nazir if neither of you is a Nazir. And another added, I am hereby a Nazir if both of you are Nazirim. And finally, the last person said, I am hereby a Nazir if all of you who spoke before me are Nazirim. So about this situation, which is obviously a hypothetical drawn up so that we can elaborate the law, Beis Shammai say that they are all Nazirim. As by saying, I am hereby a Nazir, they have accepted Nazirus upon themselves, even if their statements turn out to be incorrect. Beis Shammai maintained that a vow of Nazirus taken in error is considered a valid vow of Nazirus, right? And we've been saying this a few times here in this chapter 5, that Beis Shammai say that erroneous consecration is consecration, and Beis Hillel say that erroneous consecration is not consecration. There's nuance to that, there's exceptions, but that's the general principle. And Beis Hillel say that's what Beis Shammai say. Beis Hillel say only he whose statement was not fulfilled is a Nazir. And Rabbi Tarfon says not a single one of them is a Nazir, including those whose statements were correct. Rabbi Tarfon maintains that a vow of Nazirus must be pronounced in an explicit manner without any hint of uncertainty. In this case, none of them knew for sure the identity of the person coming toward them, and therefore they could not be certain that they were Nazirim at the time of their vows. If the person approaching them turned back so that his identity was never discovered, then not one of them is a Nazir, says the anonymous opinion of our Mishnah, which means it's the law. So the matter was never clarified. The halacha, this person was never identified, and the law is lenient in cases of uncertain Naziris. Now, Rabbi Shimon says that the law is stringent with regard to an uncertainty of this kind, and therefore they should proceed as follows in order to avoid any uncertainty. Each of those who took a vow should say, if it was in accordance with my statement, meaning if I said, I am a Nazir if that's so-and-so, so if it really was so-and-so, okay, so I'm an obligatory Nazir. I made a vow based on a condition, and the condition was fulfilled. And if not, I am hereby a voluntary Nazir, and in this manner they are all Nazirim, and they have all made sure that they didn't skirt their obligation if indeed they became Nazir. That is Mishnah number 4. Here comes the Gemara. The Gemara questions the opinion of Beis Hillel. Why? Beis Hillel said if he whose condition was not fulfilled, right? Only he whose condition was not fulfilled, only he whose statement was not fulfilled is a Nazir. That's what Beis Hillel said in the Mishnah. Gemara says, why is he whose statement was not fulfilled a Nazir? You'd think it would say, if that is John Smith, I am a Nazir. So you'd think Beis Hillel would say, he whose statement was fulfilled became a Nazir. Why does it say he whose statement was not fulfilled? Rabbi Yehuda answers. He says, one must amend the wording of the Mishnah so that it says only he whose statement was fulfilled becomes a Nazir. Now we're on 33a. Abaye said, one must correct his understanding of the Mishnah. It's not that the Mishnah needs to be amended. It's that you understood it wrong. You need to correct your understanding of the Mishnah so that it deals with a situation where, in addition to his first statement, the person said, even if it is not so and so, I shall be a Nazir. Right? They all meant to become nazirim. That's why Beis Shammai, in a sense, was more correct. Like, they meant to become nazirim, and they were adding this stuff, to make their speech a little bit more colorful, but they intended to become nazirim. And so they said, if that's so-and-so, I'm a Nazir. But even if it's not so-and-so, I'll be a Nazir. And what is the meaning of the phrase whose statement was not fulfilled that Beis Hillel spoke? It means his first statement was not fulfilled as it was not that person. Rather, he is a Nazir because his last statement was fulfilled, meaning he added, and I will be a Nazir even if it's not so-and-so. Now, the Mishnah taught that if the individual walking toward them turned back so that his identity remained unknown, not one of them is a Nazir. And the Gemara clarifies the reason is only because he turned back, from which it may be inferred that if the person comes before us and is identified, then the one who said he should be a Nazir if it is so-and-so is considered to be a Nazir. And the Gemara inquires in accordance with whose opinion is this law? Right? And so it seems like if they never found out who he was, okay, then none of them are Nazir. But that means that if he came and they found out who he was, then at the very least, the one who said, if that's so-and-so, and it is so-and-so, he's got to be a Nazir. But maybe if he came and was identified, all of them are Nazirim. It's only in the case where he was never identified that none of them are Nazirim. Now we're on 33b. There is no text on 33b, as I explained earlier. And now we're on 34a. So if we say it is the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, so even in a case where the individual in question came before us and identified himself, is the one who claimed to know his identity to be a Nazir? Since at the time when he vowed, he did not know whether the subject of their debate is so-and-so or not, does nazirus take effect with regard to him? But isn't it taught in a baraisa, in the Tosefta 319, right? Tosefta was a commentary on the Mishnah shortly after the Mishnah was published. Has nothing to do with Tosafists, different word. That Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, in the case of the Mishnah, not one of the 6 people is a Nazir, since nazirus is imposed upon someone only if the vow is stated with explicitness. That's what we want. Right? We want it to be that you become a Nazir when you say you want to be a Nazir, and not when you speak with ambiguity and weird conditions that might or might not be fulfilled. A person's going to take on a profoundly, restrictive and world-changing, even for a short time, right? Because you create, it's a vow, which is a serious business, and you're going to take something that is permitted to you and make it prohibited, and you're going to make it itself also prohibited for you to, participate in funerals, because you can't become impure for the dead, etc. And then you're going to have to bring offerings at the end. Like, we don't want people undertaking that vow with any kind of ambiguity. We would much prefer for them to have to speak clearly in order to become a Nazir. Right, and that's what Rabbi Tarfon is saying. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rabbi Tarfon. In the case of the Mishnah, not one of these people is a Nazir, since nazirus is imposed upon someone only if the vow is stated with explicitness. And the Torah says that a vow must be clearly pronounced. It says that in the Torah. As the verse states, when either man or woman shall clearly utter a vow, the vow of a Nazir, Numbers 6:2. And this verse indicates that his vow is valid only if it is explicit, at least according to Rabbi Tarfon. Now, rather, the Mishnah represents the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as stated with regard to a heap of grain, as it is taught in a Baraisa in Tosefta 2:9. If someone said, I am hereby a Nazir on the condition that this heap of grain contains 100 kor, a big measure of grain, and a measure which is a measure of its volume. And when he went to measure that pile of wheat, he discovered that the heap had been stolen or had been lost, so that the amount it held can never be determined. So in that case, Rabbi Shimon deems him prohibited, meaning he is a Nazir. He's prohibited to drink wine, as the heap might have contained 100 kor. And Rabbi Yehuda deems him permitted, meaning he is not a Nazir. He can continue to drink wine, as he maintains that the law is lenient in cases of uncertain Nazirs. Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning applies equally to the case of the Mishnah. As for Rabbi Shimon, who disputes the ruling of the Mishnah, he holds with regard to the heap of grain, and I'm almost done, so if you've got questions or comments, get them in. Since if the heap had not been stolen, perhaps it might have contained 100 kor, and he would have been a Nazir, so now too he is a Nazir due to uncertainty. And here too, in the case of our Mishnah, since that might have been so-and-so, or it might not have been so-and-so, if that person had come before us and we would have known his identity, so then the one who took the vow based on that should be a Nazir. Consequently, now too, he is a Nazir as the result of uncertainty cast by the unknown identity of the individual. What is the law? I am hereby Nazir if this is so-and-so. With regard to two people who are walking together and disagreed with regard to the identity of the individual approaching them, and one said, I'm hereby Nazir if that person is Shimon, as you claim, and the other replied, I am hereby Nazir if it is Reuven. And if he was in fact Reuven, the second person is a Nazir. And this interpretation is in accordance with Abaye's explanation. If the person whose identity was subject to the above debate turned around so that they never discovered his identity, neither of them is a Nazir. Even though one of them might have been a Nazir, we're not going to make them Nazirim out of uncertainty. And that concludes Mishnah number 4 and its Gemara. And tomorrow we'll pick it up on page 34a with Mishnah number 5. Short Mishnah, very short Gemara, and that'll take us to the end of chapter 5. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., the normal Sunday time. Okay, let's go to questions or comments here on Nazir 33. And Bill says, unfortunately, I do. Fortunately, the answer is yes, but no. The French church was definitely one of the most powerful branches of the Catholic Church in its day, but that was because the French king was one of the most powerful Christian rulers. But his power, absolute and terrible as it could be, stopped at his borders. France was a massive nation in those days compared to other smaller kingdoms, so it is cold comfort. In other words, when they banned the Talmud throughout France, it was terrible for the people who lived in France, and that's why the Tosafists were so brave and organized in the way that they each undertook to memorize a tractate and keep the tradition of learning and teaching Talmud going. But that didn't reach, other Jewish communities around the Mediterranean and in other parts of Europe. Okay, that's the only other question that Nina forwarded to me. So that's what I've got for us tonight. May we all be blessed with a joy-filled Adar as we go into this month, the month of joy. And may we have a great week. All the best to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Shavua Tov, a good vach.